In recent years, there's been a tech trend growing and growing within the World Cup pits. Different riders across different teams and even different disciplines are reaching for this mystical product. Well, what is this product? What do they do? And why is everyone after one? Well, stick around and find out. So what we're looking at are chain dampers, active spiders, or whatever you might be calling them. So they all have a slightly different design, but they all work on the same premise. So they bolt on in place of your regular fixed chainring, and what they do is introduce a little bit of movement. Now, additional movement on your bike might not sound like a good thing, but in this case, it actually is. So on your full suspension bike, as you go through that rear wheel travel, there's a phenomenon called chain growth. So as you go through that rear wheel travel, the rear centre of your bike actually grows. Now, what I mean by that is your rear axle will move away from your bottom bracket. Now, this is an engineered thing in that it's done to prevent, or help prevent, anti-squat on your bike under pedalling load. But since your chain is essentially metal and of fixed length, it doesn't actually grow. So what happens is it just gets put under more tension. So that tension can be taken up on the lower run of the cassette by, the derailleur, whereas on the upper part, it's a fixed length between your chainring and your cassette. So that tension in the upper part of the chain will cause the chain to want to pull the chainring rearward, causing something called pedal kickback, like this. So after a number of hits, it's actually rotated that crank arm backwards. And that's why you add extra links when you size your chain, and why some rear derailleur manufacturers actually recommend setting that bead tension while the bike is at sag. How much kickback you get will depend on your suspension design, how high the engagement in your rear hub is, how harsh the impact is, and even what gear you're in. Seriously, the larger the sprocket you're in, the further you are away from the axle's movement, multiplying the force around the axle. So what this is showing is your drivetrain and your suspension are actually linked, and as a result of that, your drivetrain can actually inhibit your suspension and therefore your chassis movement. So, what if we were to isolate the two systems? Would it make your bike feel better? So the idea came to light around about 2015 when a chap named Aaron Gwyn won the Leogang Downhill World Cup. Now, the special thing about this run is he actually snapped his chain out the start gate and then went on to win. Then history almost repeated itself this year when at a World Cup, Thibaut Deprayer snapped his chain just a couple of corners into the run. He did actually light up those timing screens and even sat in a hot seat for a while, but unfortunately got knocked down to third place. But these two race runs aren't isolated incidents, so there are reports of riders snapping chains, even choosing to ride chainless in, testing. And what it's done, it's got engineers thinking, how do we harness this? How do we isolate the two parts of the bike, being your drivetrain and your suspension? So one of the most popular products to come to market has been O-chains. So they've been used across World Cup Downhill, World Cup Enduro, so they've taken up countless wins already, so no wonder SRAM recently acquired them. So what is O-chain? Well, it's referred to as an active spider. So your chainring is bolted onto a spider that allows for controlled rotation of the chainring rearward to work against the force of the pedal kickback. There's elastomers within the O-chain itself as a form of spring. Then there's a degree of float, which in O-chain's case is either adjustable on the fly using the easy system like we have here, or by changing the elastomer inside the case of their other offerings. In short, the bigger the hits, the bigger the float you want. So for downhill and dedicated gravity days, setting this to 12 degrees will benefit you the most. But if you want a quicker engagement for pedaling, setting the system to a lower degree of float will be more beneficial to you. It's this float that is allowing the suspension to work more freely. You'll not just notice it through the suspension feel, but by now how reduced the kickback through the pedals is. So one of the newer products to come to market has been Rimpact's chain damper. Now, this differs in that the idea of it is to capture the chain's energy and reduce that noise at the back of your bike as opposed to directly addressing pedal kickback. So the Rimpact has a fixed 5 degrees of float and a really stiff spring in it to capture that chain energy. It also has an integrated chainring on it, and what this does is with a really good seal, it just helps extend that service interval. So both these devices work to reduce feedback through your drivetrain, fatiguing the rider less and allowing the rider to concentrate on the task in hand more, which is smashing down the hill faster than the next one. But it is worth noting there are other products out there with the aim of reducing drivetrain noise. So there was Canyon Project Disconnect, and way back in the day, Canyon worked on an idea called Project Disconnect that allowed riders to disconnect their engagement system in the rear hub at the flick of a switch. It wasn't the cleanest system, unfortunately, and never made it out the R&D stage. Then we have the E13 Sidekick hub, and yeah, E13 have this hub which disengages the drivetrain from the rear wheel when coasting. It's a similar premise to what Canyon tried, but uses a clever pull carry system. It's a lighter, cleaner system, and has already been used to win downhill World Cups. Idler wheels, so a little bit more specific, but some other brands have experimented using idler wheels. You'll usually find these on high pivot frame designs. High pivot frame designs allow the rear axle to move rearward and as a result potentially cause even more tension to be put through that chain. Having an idler wheel above the chainring helps keep that rearward drivetrain force in check whilst the rear centre grows. These are frame specific and as a result come with other characteristics that Owen covered in our high pivot suspension explainer. Another blast from the past are neutral gears. Simply, riders putting a spacer in place of a sprocket in the cassette, so when they select that gear, it disengages the drivetrain. The issue with this is remembering where the gear is amongst the others. Also, if you need a quick jab on the pedals in a techie section, you'll get absolutely nothing. Not ideal. When this topic comes up, a lot of people ask, why don't you just use a low engagement rear hub? Well, it's not quite as consistent as a chain damper. So what I mean by that is if you're using a pull or even a ratchet system, you might be at the low point of it or the high point, depending on where and how the force is being applied through the drivetrain. So with something like the chain damper, you've got that sort of fixed or adjustable degree of float that you can prepare for. And then most modern mountain bikes are now fitted with clutched rear derailleurs. Now, the clutch system helps to just reduce that chain noise and keep a little bit more tension in there, but again, they can actually inhibit your suspension's movement. It's a really tricky balance. So we're here at Bike Park Wales today, and I've got 3 chain sets with me. So I've got the XT set with an O chain fitted, I've got this SLX set with a Rimpact device fitted, and I've got my standard XTR crankset that I just happen to have lying around in my spares box. So I've already done a couple of laps today on my faithful XTR crankset, so I know how that feels. So we're gonna get back to the top and I'm gonna fit the Rimpact device first. Let's see how that goes. So we've just fitted the Rimpact device. It's really cool. It's definitely like a buffer in there. So I'm gonna see how that translates when I send it down hot stepper. Let's get to it. Woo. Super quiet. Cool, so that was the run on the Rimpact device. So I'm going to swap it out for the O-chain one. Now, first impressions were, you really do notice that spring when you're pedaling. So on that little pedal up to the top I did there, like I was saying, it does really reward keeping that pedaling action nice and circular and keeping the device loaded up. And then downhill, it just felt super plush. Like super plush. You can definitely feel that spring working, and the noise, like what noise? There was very, very little coming from the rear end of the bike. So we're gonna get this off and we're gonna give the O-chain a go. On the theory, well, it's more than a theory, but a quiet bike is a fast bike, that's for sure. And reducing the feedback through the pedals as well as the noise, I mean, that's just gonna fatigue your rider less. And yeah, allow them to concentrate on that task in hand of getting down the hill super quick. And yeah, concentrate on line choice and things like that. So I can definitely see why people are running these. Right, it's time for the O-chain run. Let's go. To fully test the device, I've left it in the 12-degree fully open position just to see how much is how much. First thing up the ramp I noticed is how quiet the O-chain makes the back of the bike. Coming into the woods where it's a bit lumpier. Double, yeah boy. Break it to the corner. Even just feels like you've got more traction on that back wheel. Rear wheel in, take the right line. Drop, another drop. Yep, woo. So what I've noticed pedaling back up, the O-chain really does reward a good pedaling action. And what I mean by that is keeping it loaded up against that buffer. Then descending, it feels really good as well. Definitely makes the back end of the bike quieter. So before we hit the trails today, I thought I'd get an insight, having not run one of these devices before, from someone, yes, that has run one of the devices, someone that has worked on the devices as a mechanic for a racer, and then someone who's engineered one of these products from the ground up. So yeah, today we're diving into the world of like chain dampers, and I know you're running the Rimpact chain device, so yeah, what switched you onto it?
Yeah, I mean, I was on chain dampers, if you like, from the start. Obviously, O-Chain were first on the scene, I believe, 2020, I'm going to say. I actually tried to get one delivered. We were out in Lusa for the Mini World Cup, if you like, that season. And obviously noticed a few of the top guys had them on their bikes. So obviously you want to slice of the pie. So I actually ordered one, but it didn't come in time. Yeah, no, I was probably one of the early guys to use it. And yeah, I'm a big fan of them. And obviously now I'm on the Rimpact, which in my opinion is, it is obviously different. And yeah, obviously you can compare them, but in my opinion, it's a superior product compared to it.
That's cool. So obviously, yeah, you're saying you ran other types of chain damper before, but sort of moving to this new system. Can you remember what your initial thoughts were on it when you first rode it?
Yeah, initially, obviously, first time you use a chain damper, it's very weird. It's almost like your free hub slipped or something like that. It's like, definitely takes getting used to. I've actually spoke to people like when I've been at Dovey and that, and they've actually literally just thrown one on in the car park. And obviously they're a bit taken back by it initially because it is a strange feeling. It does take in getting used to. And yeah, but like anything with time, you do get used to it. And obviously once you're downhilling, probably one of the last things on your mind is that engagement delay, if you like.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so off the back of that, just say it's sort of influenced your riding style a little bit, or have you had to sort of change things up a bit?
Honestly, no, I don't think it's changed anything regarding my riding style. Yeah, everything feels the same. It's one of them. It's just, yeah, if you can use one, I would obviously recommend it because it can only help you, in my opinion. And if, you know, tracks are getting that fast and rough now.
Cool. So, yeah, off the back of that, I guess, do you think, I say, everyday riders would benefit from it, or is it sort of tech that guys and girls that, yeah, are dialed into their bike and how that feels? Is that the only sort of group that would benefit from it?
No, I think everyone could benefit from a chain damper, to be honest. Again, depends on the bike, but then saying that, in theory, the high pivot guys don't necessarily need one yet. You look at every high pivot World Cup race bike, there's a good chance it's got one on. So yeah, no, I think, a weekend warrior to a, hardened racer, I think it'd be crazy to overlook one. And don't get me wrong, I know they're expensive and it's a vulnerable part. But again, like if you are looking for that little advantage or gain, then it's something I'd definitely be looking into.
Well, I thought we're talking about chain dampers today, and yeah, I thought it'd be really good to get your insight on it and how they were integrated into your sort of race setup that you were helping Loris with. So in your time as mechanic for Loris, he started running the chain damper. What switched him on to using it in the first place?
So those O-chain, those chain damper, those O-chain came out like 4 or 5 years ago or something, 6 years ago, and we started to see them around and everything, and we kind of thought, yeah, it would be good to try, just trying everything. And so wanted to try, talk to Trek, talk to the engineer and everything, and everyone at Trek, also engineers said, well, you have a eye pivot, so you don't need a chain damper.
Yep.
So it doesn't make sense with eye pivot. And Loris was like, well, I still want to try it. So I said, okay, just try it out. And straight away, Loris said, yep, it's better. So all the engineers were like mind-blowing. Said, yeah, but eye pivot, you should not be using. So well, just try yourself. And yeah, so even with a eye pivot, we should cancel the kickback. It's still, at the end of the day, if you have a chain, you have kickback. So basically, those O-chain, the more degree as you can, and it's just gonna be feeling like a chainless bike. And so the funny story, like in the syndicate days, so like probably 7-8 years ago, so I did weld like a fake cog on a bearing on a cassette, just to have like a dead gear in the middle of his cassette, so he could just switch into the middle of his cassette, so the dead gear will not create kickback. And he said, "Oh yeah, it's so good. Once the chain is in," he said, "but the thing is, it's so hard to know which cog it is in a cassette." So he was like, "No, we don't use it." But he did try like a couple of races with that setup. And Troy Brosnan as well, back in the days, used to shave the teeth on one of his cassettes just to have like the free feeling as well. So we did try 10 years ago, 8 years ago, some different setup, and now it's finally coming with those hubs. Those E13, is that E13 making those hubs, O-chain, and Rimpact as well. Yeah, it's good. Basically, I want one on each of my bike as well.
We're seeing these devices used widely in and out of sort of racing circles, and your product is widely used within that. So what led you to pursuing a chain damper device?
Honestly, we looked at other devices that were on the market and saw potential in them, but we're kind of somewhat disappointed with the performance we got out of the products when trying different things on the market, and we just knew that there was a much there's much more potential in the product type and that category. And yep. I've always personally struggled with drivetrain feedback as a thing, doing anything I can to kind of wrap my chainstay and like manage all that kind of chatter you get from the back end when you're kind of hitting rougher tracks. So yeah, we were really excited about the idea that we could mitigate that and make our bike smoother. I'm a confidence-based rider, so the quieter my bike is, the better I ride. So whenever my derailleur would get smashed off and I'd have to run chainless for the rest of the day in the park, suddenly my lap times come down and I'm having more fun on the bike. So the idea of developing a product that can give you most of, if not a totally chainless feel, was super exciting to me and the rest of the team.
Well, so that's really cool to hear that, actually, your sort of personal take on that with your riding as well. So what sort of feedback are you getting from people when they try your device for the first time, and does it sort of differ between, say, a racer and an everyday rider?
The feedback is the same. It doesn't matter whether it's a racer or just an average Joe. It's usually one of shock and a little bit of disbelief. If you've ever ridden chainless, then you'll know that the bike does feel a lot nicer. But it's a very bizarre feeling to have your bike feel like that while still being able to pedal and pump the bike and use it as you normally would. So usually riders get to the bottom of the run and they'll like pull up. I mean, we've had this multiple times. They'll pull up Instagram and send us a voice note just praising us. And that's like an amazing like feedback loop, because then I jump back into design and work and trying to make these things better, because I can see the effect we're having on riders and racers.
So a massive thank you to our contributors today, Matt, Adam and PA. So off the back of the conversation with them, and even in this short experiment I've done today, even at my riding level, I do notice the difference. So if you are the kind of person that is looking into investigating a chain damper device, 100% I would recommend giving it a go. But if you're the sort of person just out for a laugh, having a ride with your mates, or you're not really focused on smashing times down trails, then yes, stick with your fixed chainring and save yourself a couple of hours just in servicing. And on that note, if you are running one of these devices, you are going to want to occasionally service it. So in a dry summer, you could probably get all the way through it before needing to open the devices up and giving it a spruce up. But something like a harsh, muddy British winter, then I'd maybe consider doing it every other ride. I know World Cup racers will have their mechanic pull them apart almost after every run just to make sure they're running sweet. So just bear that in mind. For me though, I'm really keen to see how these devices perform over a number of suspension platforms, so don't be surprised if you see them popping up on a video from time to time. And let me know down in the comments, have you run a chain damper device or another chain damping device before? Let me know what you think of them or any other alternatives, down in the comments. This is GMBN Tech, I'm Adam, and I'm off to the bike wash for a shower, so see you in a bit.